Hello everyone. Today we're going to be talking about fiscal policy. And we've already talked about monetary policy, which are the policies that the Federal Reserve, our nation's central bank, can use to affect aggregate demand and affect the United States' macroeconomy. Today we're going to look at fiscal policy, which are the things that the President and Congress can do to help affect the amount of aggregate demand in an economy. And we're looking at how the President and the Congress can use taxes, government spending, to help control the U.S. economy and to fight inflation as well as unemployment. All right, so once again, we're looking at the President here, we're looking at the Congress. They combined do fiscal policy. Now, there's a couple different theories of fiscal policy, supply side and demand side economics. So let's start off with supply side economics. So supply side economics focuses on achieving economic stability and growth by increasing the supply of goods and services throughout the economy. So supply-side economists favor tax cuts and reduction in regulation to encourage individuals and firms to invest in new businesses and products. So supply-side economics is very much favored by Republicans, by conservatives. They favor less taxes, less regulation. That encourages people to work harder, to invest, and ultimately to increase the amount of supply of goods and services throughout the economy. That ultimately helps the U.S. economy. One of the big proponents of supply-side economics was good old Ronald Reagan right there. He was a big proponent during the 1980s. All right, so let's look at demand-side economics. So demand-side economics focuses on achieving economic growth through the government's influence on aggregate demand. And standard monetary policy is demand-side. Okay? Now, the government can influence aggregate demand through government spending as well as changes in taxes. So a big difference between demand-side and supply-side economics is that the government's going to influence aggregate demand. It's going to influence it oftentimes through government spending. Supply-side economists are not big fans of stimulating the economy through government spending. So it's liberals, Democrats in Congress, and the executive branch in the White House that generally favor demand-side economics. Now, the founder of demand-side economics was this gentleman here. His name is John Maynard Keynes, and he really developed a lot of these principles of demand-side economics during the Great Depression. All right, now, there are two types of fiscal policy. The first is a restrictive fiscal policy where the government increases taxes, reduces aggregate spending in order to reduce aggregate demand. So this is used to fight inflation, and because you're increasing taxes and reducing spending, it's going to have an effect on the national budget. It's going to move it towards a surplus because they're increasing the amount of money coming in, they're reducing the amount of money being spent, so the government ultimately is going to be collecting money, and that will be pushing the budget to a surplus. All right, so according to demand-side economics, we have restrictive fiscal policy. We also have an expansionary fiscal policy where the government reduces taxes, increases government spending in order to increase aggregate demand. And so this is usually used to fight unemployment, and the effect on the budget is going to be it's going to create a budget deficit because the government is bringing less money in, but it's increasing the amount of government spending in order to increase aggregate demand. And ultimately that is going to create a budget deficit. So restrictive fiscal policy fights inflation, and a expansionary policy is used to fight an unemployment problem. All right, so let's look at some of the policy limitations. First of all, there's timing problems. It takes a lot of time after an economic problem like inflation or unemployment is identified for Congress to act. Remember, we have 435 members of Congress, 100 senators, one president. Then they all have to agree in order to be able to implement fiscal policy. So lots of times there's back and forth, there's negotiations regarding fiscal policy. This can take time, so it can be a problem in terms of after people see there's a problem, what's the solution, and they have to debate about it, and ultimately that creates big timing problems for fiscal policy. And there's political pressures. Okay, there's big pressure on congressmen and presidents, okay, to do certain things to get reelected, like to cut taxes or to increase government spending. So that's definitely a policy limitation. You have unpredictable economic behaviors. So, for example, people will respond to, say, higher taxes by moving their money around so they don't have to pay those taxes. So that's a big policy limitation. Then you have a lack of coordination. For fiscal policy to be most effective, it has to be coordinated with monetary policy, but it is not always done that way. All right, so let's answer some questions. What entity controls fiscal policy in the United States? And what type of economics most encourages government spending? All right, so for the summary, we're going to compare and contrast a restrictive and an expansionary fiscal policy. All right, thanks a lot, guys. I will check this. Check these notes tomorrow, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.